And good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for spending your valuable time right here with the Adapt 2030 live broadcast, Patriot TV Uncensored. Today's program, what do ancient Greek gods and the Nord Stream pipeline sabotage have in common? Jupiter. Jupiter's atmosphere just increased in heat by 1,200 degrees, and the atmosphere of Jupiter expanded 80,000 miles. We're electromagnetically connected to that, so there has to be an excuse why there's going to be even more food shortages. Take away the natural gas, you take away the ability to produce everything we need for farm inputs on the fertilizer side. And at the same time, you stop all the protests sweeping through Europe demanding that their governments turn back on the pipeline regardless of sanctions. And welcome back. Thank you for sticking with us through the break right here, Patriot TV Uncensored. David Dubine, Adapt 2030. Now, just before the break, I was talking about Jupiter's atmosphere suddenly heating 1,200 degrees and then the atmosphere itself expanding 80,000 miles. This will definitely be a sign in the sky. Now, the thing is, Jupiter, if I could fast forward here, Jupiter is that very large planet, as you can see with the arrow. But then where's the Earth? That little tiny thing to the left there where I put the white arrow. So whatever caused Jupiter's atmosphere to expand and heat dramatically, we're in the same solar system. Whatever's causing that is also starting to cause changes on our own planet here. Electrical fronts, electrical storms. Now, was the hurricane electrified? Yeah, if you look at GOES satellite on the, it was GOES East, the NOAA feed watching that loop come in, that thing stuck there for about 6 hours, but you could see along the whole entire front nothing but electrical activity. You could see a perfect disc shape of electrical discharge the whole time it was spinning, which, verifies that we are in an electrical connective phase right now with the sun and an uptick. So just look at the size comparison of that for a moment here. So Jupiter is so much larger than the Earth. And to have that much change happen so suddenly, it means that it is reconnecting back with our sun somehow, and that field line. Now, here's something about electricity. I didn't know until I started delving into this years ago. The electricity lines that are coming into your house, you think when you turn on the light that they're pushing the current through the copper, that there's some electrons flowing through. Well, that is true sort of to a basic state. But what the electric company does is they create a magnetic field along the line so the electricity can transit that magnetic field. Good health is our greatest wealth, and I'm really enjoying the benefits of C60 EVO organic olive oil. When I take it daily, my focus is sharper, and I have a lot more energy and endurance. I sleep deeper, wake up feeling more refreshed. C60 EVO's ESS60 is a breakthrough technology making C60 safe for human and pet consumption. It's been called a miracle molecule due to the physical and mental benefits people are enjoying. C60 EVO manufactures ESS60 infused edible oils, skin serums, lip balms, and pet formulas. The results are truly noticeable. Treat yourself and those that you care about with these life-enhancing products. For 100% ESS60 purchased directly from the lab at c60evo.com/adapt2030 and use the promo code ADAPT2030 to take an additional 10% off your order. That link's in the description box below. Click and go. And now on with the video. They still don't know how it works. They just figured out how to put it to turn it on, but still, if we're going down into the quantum levels, they're still trying to figure it out. Your electricity is not running through that copper wire. It is following the magnetic field created to allow that current to flow through the magnetic field. The same thing would be true if it's a magnetic field coming off of the sun connecting with Jupiter, then that would also allow electrical conductivity with that, and more electric. Like I say, turn up that light bulb in a coffee shop and it glows brighter. Turn it down, it dims. We're seeing the exact same thing happening here. So what would the effects be on our planet? Well, immediately we're going to start to see cloud cells moving in the wrong place. These are all connected electrically and locked into place electrically. So if our magnetic field's real tight and strong, These cloud cells stay in their general vicinities and they don't move. Same with the jet streams. They keep their flows. But I mean, that's just the basics of it. So why don't we talk about the winter here? What can we expect based on what happened on Jupiter and what's going to happen with our winter? How intense is it going to get? And can we see some electrical effects here on our planet, on the Earth? Absolutely, yes. So we'll look at the polar circulation in the northern hemisphere is skewed right now, to the point they're noticing it going, wow, this is really, really rare. This is unusual what we're seeing here, and does not portend well for the United States or for Europe in terms of temperatures, snowfall, and extremes. So if we look, this is a super basic here. So if the graphics they give you from NOAA and these type of thing, they'll say, okay, stable polar vortex, super tight looped thing. It's almost like a perfect spinning spiral, and you're supposed to visualize it, okay. But they don't really show you columns in the atmosphere. And then they say, wavy polar vortex. But wait, it's the same cylindrical column that's supposed to be tight, locked into place, but somehow it spills over and causes these tongues, if you will. The polar vortex is when this thing becomes unstable on one side and it's allowed to spill out. So I thought I'd go the extra mile here and let's look at it deeper and higher into the atmosphere. So this is truly what the polar vortex looks like if you're going to look at it from a diagram like this. And it will keep that cylindrical conical shape there to a degree. Now, the more it's locked in, the tighter it winds around itself, and really it becomes a perfect cylinder at times. But what we're seeing here is that red that's spilling out over Greenland, for example. That shouldn't be there right now. Oh no, this is months in advance of where it should be. So the onset of winter, according to these charts here, is months early. Now, there's also a science behind this. Like, why is it spilling out over in that general direction? Well, if you look at that dark blue and we look at Kamchatka Peninsula in Russia, the more snow cover there is earlier in the season, something with that magically makes it spin in a different way with the snow cover or the albedo effect or whatever it does with the evaporative moisture, and it causes that cavitation, which then will spill out on the opposite side of the planet. And when I say that here, I circled it for you. So when this builds an enormous amount of snow cover, and look how much snow is there already, and this is coming into the first week of October. Well, I think it's GSF model, yeah, GEFS models. Going out, and Severe Weather EU, great resource. You know, I like to give you some resources so you can back check and do some of your own research after. If you're interested in this type of information, you definitely want to go to Severe Weather EU, because they've done a really good rundown on what's going to happen with the polar vortex and what it's done during the past and where they expect it to move to in the future. So with that being said, if you understand the cavitation, that the amount of snowfall that is falling and prematurely building over in the Kamchatka Peninsula is going to continue to build. And the more that builds early season, the more cavitation, which I circled there in black, is going to spill out, which means extreme cold. These tongues of the polar vortex would not surprise me in any way, shape, or form if it reached down to Cuba this year. Last year they had freezing temperatures in Miami. And you know what? The Seminole Native American Indians, Seminole, Florida, they actually had a term for snow and ice. It was called the Great White Rain. Everglades froze during the Maunder Minimum, which was 1640, 1660. There are accounts of the Seminole Indians talking about the Great White Rain and the freezing of the Everglades for 10 years. Not straight, but it would freeze over all that water down there in different parts and pockets. So if you start to look back in history, it's not just science, then it's suddenly tradition saying, well, this is a cycle. Look for it this year to go very, very, very far south, even down into Puerto Rico. The polar vortex this year spinning and dumping down there. So what would that mean for us? Well, we're going to need more electricity, we're going to need more heat. Now, if you look at the GFS model here, they'll give you that same cylindrical shape in just a different format of how you look at the polar vortex structure. Where it sits, how it moves, how it spins, what affects the spin, what affects the dump out of air pockets on the other side. But one thing in common, did you notice what both of these show here? A cylindrical setup. What's causing that? What's it encircling should be the better question. Magnetic field lines of our planet. Coming in on the North and the South Pole. Now those are the most famous, obviously, because we get the Aurora Borealis, the Auroras in the southern hemisphere australis. Got to say it with the right accent there. But what do you see in the middle there, those little ones that are popping out? Well, those are related to the Van Allen radiation belt and the southern Atlantic anomaly magnetically also. So the southern magnetic anomaly is turning on as well. Much more intense, but it's actually riding on one of those field lines right where it terminates on the Earth. So we're starting to see it everywhere, this uptick. Now we're really starting to see it on our planet. We're seeing it in the heavens in Jupiter and Mars, and now we're here. It's here. That circle of what you see of the polar vortex, that is wrapping around a magnetic field line, and that's how it holds its shape. Right here, the hill currents and the outer hill currents, the ribbon current system, those are the ones that are coming in more mid-latitudes. These are also being affected. So again, it's about a current system. You can either turn up the current and get a higher electrical vibration, or you can turn it down. Either way, the higher you go, the more electricity in the atmosphere. And that bottom right there, that's a plasma rope, plasma arc. These were first sighted in 2017. And this one is called Steve, the person who finds it gets to name it. First sighted in 2017, quote unquote. But then you go back to tapestries in the 1500s, 1400s, 1300s, and these ropes are everywhere across their tapestries. So we're starting to see a matchup in, oh, maybe it's not just a dragon tongue coming out. Maybe it's one of these electrified plasma ropes that just gets into an extreme electrified state. And then, well, how would you describe that to future generations? So 2007, I babble sometimes. So 2017 is when this was first sighted, and now it's so common that it's in the nightly skies with the picket fence auroras as well. Meaning that the same exact principle in play, you can scale it in any direction you want to, micro, macro. So if you're looking at the polar vortex, think about it as a magnetic field wrapped around that's visible. The same thing, that plasma rope is a field-aligned current twisting on itself, wrapped around, visible in that cylindrical format there. See, this is the thing to think about. The current on our planet can either go up and outbound, or it can come in from space and from the electrical field of the sun. Now, our sun was really highly charged for these last couple hundred years, but it's stepping down. So the electrical flow, if something's overcharged, like a capacitor, it needs to de-electrify itself. It needs to decharge. So it happens in the upper atmosphere, and you're going to start to see the current flow. It can either come in on a field line or it can go out on a field line, depending. That's why you're seeing all this ground-to-sky lightning, and some of these plasma arcs are on the outbound flows as well. And if you look at the really nice hand drawn there, you're going to see the positive current flow and the negative current flow. Now, we are definitely in an electrical coupling with the sun. This explains a lot. It's not CO2. It is for sure the sun. Not you, not CO2, it's the sun. Now there's an actual term for this called the global electric circuit. And what we're used to seeing is on the very bottom there, that bottom layer of what you see with your eyes, well, you'll see the lightning. Now most times the lightning goes from the cloud down to the earth. Higher in the atmosphere, sometimes you get this ground to sky reverse lightning, and you'll get into that upper level where it's coming out and connecting with the sun's magnetic field lines, and you'll start to see these red sprites, blue jets. And these are becoming much more intense, size-wise. Now before these things, this red jet that you're looking at, the third image, the third layer up there, these were once, even just 20 years ago, thought as fairies or some kind of mythical thing that the ancients had carved on a canyon wall. Like, oh, I don't know anything, they live in caves, they're scratching stuff on canyon walls. No, this is what they saw. And only in the last 20 years has it become visible enough, and we had high-tech equipment enough to start to capture it. But 20 years ago, this thing would flash up there for 1/20th or 1/100th of a second. That's all the longer it would had enough electricity in the atmosphere to hold state. It's plasma. So it had to have electricity to make it glow, like a plasma bulb that you see on any advertisement. Eat a Joe's, put a current into it, and zzz, and it glows. Currently, these things are up there for 6 seconds. That's the difference in the last 20 years of how much electricity is in our atmosphere for this thing to hold state and start glowing. Now, here's the magic. You start to see what they call the elves at the top termination point, and what do you see again there? A circle. It's wrapped around the magnetic field line. It's actually visible. That empty area in the center is the magnetic field line. It's being wrapped around by current, and it just shows you it's visible. So again, you can scale this. So if we're talking about little tiny plasma ropes, or if we're talking about larger global electric circuit termination points at the ionosphere, get those donuts. You're talking about the polar vortex. You're getting the same exact thing, but that's a major current flow coming in on the North Pole. So, you can start to map this out and use this for crop forecasting as well. The blue jets, this was a photograph from the International Space Station, but you see how the electrical, it's blowing out through the top of the atmosphere. Now that's invisible to our eyes, but if you had the correct instrumentation, you could see where that magnetic field would just come right back and connect back to the sun. That ELV up there that you're seeing, that donut shape, if you will, is starting to mark areas on the planet that are becoming more highly electrified. Now, if you start to look across and you just map these with GIS software, you can get a good indication of where local weather patterns are being disturbed across the Earth's surface, and then you can overlay those on top of crop growing zones, and then you could say, wow, you know what? If there's more current inflow, then the cloud building is either going to be disturbed and pushed away and there'll be less moisture, or something will cause an electrical field where more particulates will then build clouds and there'll be way more rainfall. So whatever way you look at it, when you see one of these directly over a crop growing zone, you know there's going to be disturbance in that. Now Russia in the Urals has this over there, and they had the lowest oat production that they've had in 70 years. So when you start to look, and this is what I'm doing, is I'm mapping these out across the planet, along with the sprites where they're visible, and also the blue jets, and trying to get the magnetic field of the planet on how that's overlapping with swarm, and then seeing which crop zones are going to be affected by the electrical activity increasing on the planet here. And what's scary is a lot of these are right over the Czech Republic and that whole, moving over eastward toward the Ukraine. So the darkest areas on the map are what traditionally where the temperatures had fallen across the planet and crop production was disrupted on temperatures. But you'll find a lot of these electrical anomalies or magnetic anomalies with the ELVs at the termination are directly over these same areas. That one right there in Europe, that's really dark blue right in the middle there, that's where a couple of these are centered over, Czech Republic specifically. So you could see where a lot of crops are being lost. And again, not to say electrically induced, but definitely the drought has affected French production down 25% this year. 25% loss of all agriculture in France at the moment. And that is obviously spilling over into Germany because they're right on the border there. But you see crop downgrade after crop downgrade. America's no different. The corn crop is off something like 13 or 14% now compared to what it was in the beginning of the year with the USDA estimates. Enter the pipelines. This is what we get as the distraction. Can't have you focused on all these external influences bending our climate system. And just for a mind experiment here, be the rulers of the planet, the elitists, so they call themselves, the central planners. Be them for just a second. Step into that role. You have two choices here. You could come clean and tell humanity what has happened, what is happening, and what is about to happen, and where it's going to amplify. They could have done this around the year 2000 and to get ready for these changes. We could have come together as communities and started, getting way more autonomous, completely off centralized supply chains. For that last 20 years, if we could have worked as a world together to, have more regional and local production of everything we need, obviously except for steel and that sort of thing. I mean, food production mainly. And if we could take some of those flowers and different plants and trees and whatnot and turn those into our own medicines, if we would have gone down that track, the world would not be in remotely the pinch that we are now. But how much panic would that have caused if you would have informed the populace around the year 2000? Nobody would invest in their IRAs. The 401ks, why bother? It's going to all end in 20 years. But they could have gotten the world ready. Choice 2, you just let it happen and deflect away with all the excuses, global warming. Is it better to know or is it better not to know? I mean, for me, I like this kind of information and I like to thrive in the change. Others can't handle that. Others will lose their mind and just freeze in place and start shaking at such information. How many times have I been in a room, two of us will talk, oh, you're just too negative. Oh, I don't want to hear about it. How do you, I don't want to hear, the supermarket's still there. Duh. Why don't you just go to the supermarket and buy your food? Why do you waste your time gardening when you could just go to the supermarket and get your food? I hear that, surprisingly or not. So would you tell the populace of what's about to happen? Again, what kind of panic would it cause? Okay, so we know we've gone down the second route of not informing anybody. So there needs to be excuse after excuse after excuse after excuse. The main number one thing that needs to be deflected away from this politics is a smoke and mirrors game. The thing that needs to be explained the most is the reason for the massive crop losses across the planet and why there's going to be famines and why your food prices are going to double and triple and why the digital rationing cards are coming in and why they're going to have armed guards in every supermarket. The flash mobs have already started. Where was that? In Philadelphia. Target the supermarkets, you're going to need guards there. We got a perfect excuse, no fertilizers, my bad. Now here's an interesting thing also. I had somebody ask me a couple questions about the pipeline. So they did register it as an earthquake out in the sea there. So you can see I put that tiny little blue area so you can see that it's the same exact island that's in the center. The Nord Stream 1 and 2 both gone. So they couldn't even turn it back on if they want to. Okay. But then how hardened are these pipelines anyway, really? I mean, the amount of time and energy and planning to destroy these things as an excuse for not enough fertilizer production and massive crop losses sweeping across the planet instead of natural variability explanations. Look at this. Carbon hardened steel, 1.6 inches thick. And then they wrap that with steel reinforced concrete 6 inches thick. And that's one section. And if you look at the bottom right, 25 tons and only one piece can go on one truck. That's how rigid this pipeline is. Now for anybody to get down there to destroy that, that's state level right there. That's not me, that's not you. I don't care how much TNT. You need some specialized equipment to rip through that. And in 4 different places, that's so high tech, you're looking at something that is not available to the public in any way, shape, or form, period. That was a state actor that destroyed this. Now, who? Like, who benefits from not having enough fertilizer on the planet for next year's crop? Who benefits when all the citizens stop rioting in the same days because they can't point fingers anymore? Who benefits because as the economy gets milked even further in the collapse phase, that nobody's aware that it's a natural cycle and that Jupiter just flared off? What's the next planet to have these effects? Ours is already starting to show the electromagnetic activity is really going to skew the atmosphere. We're beginning right now. Are we ready for it? I'm trying the best I can. I hope you do too. You have the whole weekend here to go get more seeds, get tools, get prepared. Talk with others, see if anybody knows about this. Get your communities a little bit more organized. It's a very prosperous time if you look at it in a different fashion. I thank you for joining. David Dubine signing off, Patriot TV.